Yes, thank you so much. My name is Silvester. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself and your role under the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Union organization.
Right, good day, Tafumane. My name is Peter Gift Mutasa, Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions President.
Yes, now we want to ask you that the transitional stabilization program is coming to an end, and also the national development paper is being formulated by the Minister of Finance. As Labour, have you been consulted during this process?
No, just like in the formulation of the transitional stabilization program, the government has not taken a deliberate move to consult labor through the structures that we have, like the Tripartite negotiating forum. We are not surprised because that is the nature of the government that we have currently. It is a government that does not believe in social dialogue, a government that does not believe in consultation of citizens and workers. It is a government that is pushing all its programs through the mighty power of the state. So we have not been consulted, but as you can see, TSP has been a complete failure. We are coming to the end of TSP when hospitals are not functional, when education is closed, when workers in the whole country are now slaves, earning 9 loaves for domestic workers, earning only 25 loaves of bread worth of salaries for the minimum wage. So we are expecting worse, and the government has not consulted us with the budget strategy paper. We've just seen it in the press. We are looking at it and analyzing it, and we will definitely put forward our views.
Through your analytical tools, what is it that could have been your input in this process?
So the first thing is that the lack of dialogue and consultation. Why TSP failed, it is because they failed to dialogue and consult stakeholders. As a result, the government failed to do a proper diagnostic of what the challenges the country was facing and what needed to be done. So as a result, they came up with a wrong policy. The austerity measures, it was a wrong policy as a solution of the problem that we're facing. The budget strategy paper is also full of self-praise. The government is praising itself. It is saying it has done everything well. What the government is saying as the country context is at variance with reality. So from that perspective, again, it is going to be a complete failure. Then thirdly, we have not seen the government changing its course. It has clung to its neoliberal policies, which have failed since 1981 from ASAP 1, now we are in ASAP 2. So we do not think there is going to be any change unless the government comes down to the people, discuss with all stakeholders and citizens, and agree that we've got a crisis. We have a state failure, a state that is failing to provide public service, a state that is failing to provide security and guarantee security of persons, and also a failure of state that has resulted in an economic implosion with high inflation rate, with erosion of salaries and savings and pensions, and also with a devaluation of the local currency from 1:1 now to 1:81 on official rates, and over 100, 1:100 on the real market. So these are real challenges that the government has to consult and find collective way forward with the citizens. Unfortunately, the budget strategy paper does not look at that. It is painting everything as rosy in this country, when reality is pointing that everything is terrible in this country.
Thank you so much for that information. Right now, we are coming to the year end of 2020. As Labour, we know of the disparities that you are talking about, the inflation, eroding salaries. Do you see yourself, even looking at the government itself, the civil service, are there any chances of them having a bonus?
They may have bonuses, workers may have bonuses, but those bonuses are worthless. The bonuses means nothing. We are talking about a domestic worker, for example, who is earning Zim dollar 900. And Zim dollar 900 is only able to buy them 9 loaves of bread, as I've said. We are looking at a teacher who is earning 12,500. And that 12,500 is not able, it's not sufficient for the teacher to pay school rentals, for the teacher to buy bread. That 12,000 is just a figure that is far below the poverty datum line, which is around 17,900. It is also far below the Consumer Council food basket, that is around 21,000. We are talking here about an average worker in the industry, in private sector, who is earning 2,500. That 2,500 is only about 4% of the Consumer Council basket, and it's only about 14% of the poverty datum line according to Zimsters. So even if they get ×2, a bonus on that, that bonus is worthless. So what we are saying to government is that the government is committing an economic genocide against workers and citizens. People have been enslaved, all workers have been enslaved. We are working for nothing. And that is also destroying the capacity and the capability of an economic recovery for this country. Some sectors have already been affected. There's low demand because there's low disposable incomes. So if you go to sectors like hire purchase, no one can still buy on hire purchase. That sector has been destroyed. If you go to real estate, there are no longer mortgages. If you go into many other sectors, tourism, for example, no one can go from Mutare to Victoria Falls, Mutare to Great Zimbabwe. So we have destroyed those sectors because we have decided to enslave all workers in this country. So there's no joy, there's nothing for workers to cheer about. And the issue is we have got a state failure. The state has failed. So the only way to address the state failure is to bring back people into the economic development policies of the country. People must speak to the issues that they want to be addressed. Instead of harassing people, intimidating people, jailing people who are raising dissenting voice, the government must now listen to the voices of the people. But for workers, we cannot wait until December. We cannot wait until we starve. This is why the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions is calling upon all workers to unite. We are planning and organizing a general strike for all workers, and the dates and times are coming soon. So workers have to choose either to organize, collectively fight back, or to starve in their homes.
Why then do you go to resorting to a strike where there is a negotiating tripartite forum?
So the tripartite negotiating forum is the tool that we must be using as a country to address the challenges in the labor market. But we have been pushing for this for the past 2 decades, since 1998. ZCTU has been pushing for the tripartite negotiating forum. We've been pushing for it to be legislated. Now it is legislated, but we expected it to be functioning. So from February this year, we've been trying to negotiate with government. We've been trying to ask the government to reverse SI 142. When government decided to bring in the Zim dollar, it did not consult anyone. We knew that the fundamentals, the economic fundamentals were not right. The Zim dollar was not going to maintain its purchasing power. We knew it was going to create inflation because they were going to print money and increase money supply like we used to see in 2007 and 2008. So we were aware. This is why on 11 October 2018, we got into the streets demanding that they should not bring in bond notes and bond coins, and also the challenging austerity in terms of 2% tax. So we knew the implications, but instead of listening to us, they arrested us, they brutalized us. So we have been negotiating at the Tripartite Negotiating Forum from February, and we have failed. We have seen that the government is not interested in discussing and negotiating and consulting at the Tripartite Negotiating Forum. We have seen that the platform has been rendered useless. Just 2 weeks back we were there. We tried to discuss, we tried to negotiate. The government is not listening to anyone. So there's nothing that is coming out of the Tripartite Negotiating Forum. We have declared a deadlock already at the Tripartite Negotiating Forum. This is why we are calling workers to exercise their rights, their constitutional right. It's our constitutional right to picket. It's our constitutional right to petition. It is our constitutional right to peacefully demonstrate. And also the Labour Act allows us to do so. So this is why we are calling workers to now collectively speak up. Teachers are on strike, on incapacitation. They are not at work. Many other workers are also incapacitated. We are saying we can no longer fight in our own sectors. We need all workers to come together. But even as workers, we cannot address the issues of state failure alone. We need the unemployed. We need those in the informal economy. They are also working hard but getting nothing. We need the peasant farmers who are buying their inputs in US dollars, but when selling they are dictated that they should sell in bond notes or RTGS. So farmers, tobacco farmers are losing out, goats breeders are losing out, cotton farmers are losing out. We all need to come together. So we need to come together and say we need an end to this man-made poverty. The poverty in this country is man-made because it is a result of corruption. So we need to stop corruption, and we cannot stop corruption as workers only. We need all citizens to take a stand and say we are not going to tolerate corruption. We are going into the streets. We are coming out of the streets when there's no corruption or when there's commitment to end corruption. The poverty that we have is man-made. It is a result of poor policies like the Transitional Stabilization Program and now the NDS that they're trying to come up with. Programs, policies that seek to enrich a few at the expense of the majority. So we need everyone. We are calling for all Zimbabweans, despite your political affiliation. There's no ZANU-PF person who can go in and buy using the ZANU-PF card. You can't also do it because you are an MDC. If you are a worker, you use your salary to buy your food, you use your salary to pay your rentals, to send kids to school. Look at it now, school fees has been increased, electricity has been increased, toll fees have been increased, all rates have been increased, prices of goods and services are pegged in US dollars, they are increasing daily. A kg of meat is now going for $4 to $4.50. How many of us are earning sufficient to be able to be food secure? So this is a crisis, a national crisis. And where you have state failure, you cannot look upon those who have failed you to remedy it. So it's not going to, the remedy is not going to come from government. The remedy is not going to come from the state. In all institutions, you can't even expect the parliament to work, because part of the reasons why we've got a state failure is the state has been militarized. So we do not have the democracy in this country. So you cannot use democratic institutions like parliament, like Tripartite Negotiating Forum, not even the Poland quasi-political dialogues that the state has come up with. You cannot use any of those. The only thing that can countervail military power is the power of the people. So this is why we are calling all citizens, all workers, to come together and say, we need decency, we need restoration of our dignity, we need prosperity in our country, we need to end corruption, poor governance, state brutality, and militarization of the state.
The president is on record also calling for the business mantra that Zimbabwe is open for business. Is it possible to open investment opportunities to the outsiders when the workers are at their lowest in terms of morale and their social well-being?
So if he says he's opening Zimbabwe for business, what will the business come here for if there's no market? This is one contradiction that we have also pointed out on the budget strategy paper and on TSP. So the state is brutalizing its own citizens. It is brutalizing its own workers. It's brutalizing even its own businesses. But then call external people to come in. When investors look at the country, they carry out a vigorous, a very serious analysis of that country. Part of the issues that they look at is there a market for our products? If they come here and produce, who is going to buy for them? So in a country where all workers are now slaves and where demand has gone down by up to 40%, things are getting rotten in the supermarkets there. People are not buying. Why should another supermarket come here to sell to whom? So that's a big contradiction. Investors also look at political stability. So there's no political stability in here. Investors can't even rely on the parliament, because when you think the parliament is even or balanced with these recalls, you then have one party dominating. And investors do not like that, because when one party is dominating, they can change laws willy-nilly. They can even change the constitution. And investors want security of their investments. And part of the guarantees of the security of their investment is found in the parliament. It's found in the constitution. It is also found in an independent judiciary and an independent prosecuting authority. But if you see at how the judiciary has also been captured and adulterated, no one can now trust the judiciary. So no investor, no sane investor will bring money in here. This is why we are seeing those who are being said to be investors by government. They're just dealers. They're just front men for the people who are in power. They loot here and send diamonds outside. They send gold in Dubai, as we have seen now. And then they bring their friends back, funding them, pretending to be investors. No serious investor will come in this country until we address the real challenges that the country is facing: lack of rule of law, lack of constitutionalism, lack of democracy, fascism, and brutality against citizens. No investor would want to come here and be abducted, tortured, simply for having and holding a different view with the government. So that's the first. But the second part is, why are we focusing on simply bringing foreign direct investment at the expense of developing our own capabilities, our own informal economy, our own small, medium, and micro enterprises that we have that are struggling? If the president was serious and if the government was serious about developing this economy, they should have started at developing our own entrepreneurs that we have in this country, the small players that we have, build them. Why? Because if you bring in foreign direct investors, firstly, you are going to compete with everyone else, and we don't have the environment that is competitive. Secondly, they are going to bring high-tech, new machine, new innovation. Yes, we need that, but we should know that it will come at an expense of employment. So they bring a machine here that can produce, but that only needs 10 people to work on. But if we are going to take an organic and ethnocentric economic development plan where we look at internal, if we develop our own agriculture, if we develop our own manufacturing capacity of the companies that we have that are employing people, they still have the opportunity and the capacity to ramp up production, but at the same time also employing more people. We look at the labor intensive sectors. Investors are not interested in developing your employment. They are not interested in developing your economy. They are interested in making and maximizing as much as possible the profit that they can come up with. So that is an illusion that we are going to have serious investors here. And even if we have them, we are not going to have economic development.
The government will come back to you and say, Mr. Mutasa, we are developing our own people, especially the peasants, through the Fumvuza program, the presidential input for the peasants.
So that would be a joke. I'm one person who is an advocate for indigenous knowledge systems. We need not to ditch and despise our own indigenous knowledge and practices that we have been using for many years. But we don't need to do so and use them as a measure of desperation. I think you saw what was being paraded 4 months or 5 months back when ZANU-PF said we have found the solution for production. We now have indigenous baking ovens. and they were using those mortar, brick and mortar and clay ovens. That was regressing back, not even to the 1980s or 1970s, but probably to back to Stone Age. So the government cannot take us back to Stone Age. You cannot feed the whole nation. If you feed the whole nation, you cannot export maize from Mvudza. What we had developed into before the fast track land reform process was that we had mechanized our agriculture. We now had a robust agriculture system that used to employ many people, close to 300,000 workers, and all of them lost employment. We had developed our agriculture to a position where we were exporting throughout the country, not just in SADC. We were the food basket for SADC, we were the food basket for the greater part of Africa, but we were also exporting across the world. We had brought in a system, an agricultural system that even exported to Europe in terms of beef, poultry, pork, and even flowers, horticulture, and many other areas. So we cannot regress back where we are just focusing on food security, where we are focusing on substance. That is a sign that the government has failed. In this highly competitive world, where everyone is seeking to outpace each other through innovation, through mechanization, and also through good governance and good stewardship of your own resources, the government cannot take us back to Stone Age. So yes, I personally, I support indigenous knowledge systems, and we always want to remain with our cultural practices, but it should not be an act of desperation like we are seeing. We want the government to acknowledge that they failed in agriculture, they failed to provide food security, they failed to develop an agricultural industry that can export and earn the country real foreign currency. And when they acknowledge that, we sit down and find a way forward.
There's no Christmas for the worker this year.
Nothing. We can't talk of Christmas. Workers today, they have no meal. Today, workers and their families, some of them are going to sleep hungry. We cannot talk of Christmas, which is 2 months to come. As we speak, workers have no adequate clothing. I think you heard Majongwe talking to teachers, and teachers were explaining that we can buy second-hand trousers and shirts at Mpezanamo for $1 or $2. But does the government want us to buy our underwears at second-hand at Mpezanamo too? So we cannot talk about Christmas, even though, because it's also 2 months back then. Workers are not food secure as we speak. They cannot send their kids to school as we speak. School fees is 55,000, 30,000, and your salary is 2,500. You can't balance that. Workers are also not secure in terms of housing. The majority of the working class are facing evictions. They are being chucked out from where they stay. Many are disillusioned. They are hopeless. So there's no life in this country. I may say so. There's no life for workers in this country. Workers just have to fight and defend themselves and restore their dignity. Otherwise, we can't even wait for Christmas.
Civil servants now have different pay packages or wages, which are now different. If you look at the army, the nurses, and the teachers, what's your view on that?
So the government policy after coup, I think we were all deceived. The whole country was deceived. The government, when it sent Mugabe packing, it had no plans for citizens. There were no plans for citizens whatsoever. Mugabe and the President Mnangagwa's factions were fighting for the feeding trough. They were fighting for eating. They were fighting for looting. This is what has come up to be seen and experienced now. So they then intended to build a military state. In a military state, all rights are suspended. So even if your rights are violated, you are not expected to dissent or to voice. In a military state, all constitutional provisions are suspended. You cannot utilize the judiciary, the police, the prosecuting authority. You can't use the parliament. You can't use anything. You just have to obey the command. So this is what we now have. So if you have a military state, you should expect that there will be those forms of discrimination. A military state is not built and run by the bureaucrats, the civilian bureaucrats. It is supposed to be run by the military. It is supposed to be run by the police. It is supposed to be run by the state intelligence, state security. So this is why we are seeing this. It is surprising to people who have not been following, but it is common in any military state. If you look at the General Pinochet's era in Chile from 1973, that's how the government is crafting this state, where the state's power and the state's programs are not run by consent and collective consensus. There is not supposed to be a social contract, an agreeable social contract. Everything is run by force. So for them to achieve that, they have to appease the military, they have to appease the police, they have to appease the security sector. But for us in the labor movement, that appeasement is useless. I don't know how those being appeased are going to take it, because they are also suffering. We see them also hungry. We are picking them at the roadside. They can't even fund their own transport. So everyone has been enslaved and everyone is suffering. We are all in a big prison called Zimbabwe, as Job Sikala said. So that is what we are facing. So we cannot rely on the government's goodwill. They are not going to change because they've got a plan, they've got an end at the end of it. They are looking at their objective. The objective is to cow everyone, to put fear in everyone, then loot as much as possible. The ruling elite is going to loot and milk this country dry unless the people stand up and collectively fight against the dictatorship.
Thank you so much for granting us this interview at short notice, Mr. Mutasa.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.